start covering world history myself for all of you. This is something that I had done with my mom in the past couple years. She had never really paid too much attention to history in school, didn't know much and wanted to learn. So she got a book. And then every week or so, we would meet up and discuss a chapter or two. And so we're going to be going over that as well in just a second. The book my mom wanted to go over and what I recommended was going over world history, because when you study history, yeah, you really do need to kind of know a bit of everything before you can really get into the nitty-gritty details. So we're going to be going over this book, Everything You Need to Ace World History, in one big fat notebook. It's a very good example of how to take notes on a topic. It has lots of good diagrams. It uses colors and stuff to call out terms and definitions and stuff like that. As you can kind of see here. But we're going to be starting at the very beginning, not as early as the video we just watched, but still in prehistory. Going to throw on a little bit of this music in the meantime while we go over this and bring up some images for reference. Not going all the way back to the formation of the Earth and evolution of life in general, we're just going over the evolution of humankind. 100,000 years ago, we were basically monkeys. The way humans have tried to determine where we came from and who we are and how we formed is through studies such as archaeology, which is digging up the items and things that people used and made, and the bones and remains that they left behind, as well as anthropology, which is more concerned with how people lived, how what they wore, what they ate, any customs they had, what languages they spoke. Definitely anthropology comes more into play once we get to actual societies and civilizations. But both studies, very important to understanding our history. I was actually speaking to my mom just before this about, she was having a question about, again, how do historians know what happened, which is through, analyzing historical sources, primary sources, which are sources from someone who experienced an event and stuff, are usually better, but secondary sources work as well. So the very first humans, they didn't necessarily look too much like us. Humans evolved from apes. When we're talking about evolution, this isn't Pokemon. There wasn't one monkey that would just beat the shit out of another monkey, killed them, and then got enough experience to start flashing colors, and then suddenly they turned into a human. Evolution is a process that takes hundreds of thousands of years. It is just the slow process by which people who are better at surviving, better at having kids and raising them live, while others die, and then their traits continue on, and those then eventually are used to define another species. So way back, we had a common ancestor with all apes, but gorillas kind of split off, and then you have other like chimpanzees and bonobos and stuff that split off more recently, bringing us to our species line, the hominids. They're human-like. Mostly they are defined by their ability to walk upright with their spine and with their legs functioning in order to do that, as well as having opposable thumbs. Very important for grabbing things like the tools we eventually end up making. Some of the earliest humans, recently there was a body called Lucy found, which I guess not that recently. She was found a couple decades ago. But she is believed to be the common ancestor for most hominids, and was part of the Australopithecus Australopithecus type of humans, which were, some of the first ones to walk upright and have those thumbs. You have other humanoid species that started forming about at most 2 million years ago. You have the Homo erectus, which is the ones that were most upright. They were then able to start using tools to make fire. Fire was very important for human discovery because it not only let us operate in the dark, it lets us cook our foods, avoiding any parasites or diseases that could be in raw food, as well as predators that we most definitely would have had to contend with back in that time. Getting closer to about 300,000 years ago is when we get the Homo sapien, which is what humans kind of are. It's called the wise man. They were known for their larger brains, which allowed them to start making tools from stones and bones and other things that they found. And then with these tools, they would begin to start inventing the very basic building blocks of civilization, like farming, building shelters, all that. Within Homo sapiens, there are two major distinctions. There's Neanderthals and then Homo sapiens. Neanderthals are believed to have lived around Europe and parts of Turkey. They generally had heavier builds and they were believed to have bigger brains, but were eventually fully replaced by Homo sapiens sapiens, which is all of us today. They first appeared in Africa before they began to spread out around the world. I'm going to turn this down a bit, which, before we get into the exact human migration, this period of history is called the Paleolithic period. If you have heard of the paleo diet, that's generally the idea that you eat only stuff that people living during this period would have eaten. So stuff like animals, meat, stuff like plants and fruits, vegetables, those things that you would have been able to forage for. But during this time period, also sometimes called the Stone Age, humans started making their simple tools from stone and flint. This includes spears, axes, a bow and arrow, maybe a harpoon or a fishing rod. They started learning how to weave baskets, doing the basics of pottery and masonry to create small stone statues, or even sometimes statues or figures from bones. This is when maybe even some of the first musical instruments were starting to be formed. When it comes to how people in the Paleolithic period lived, they were primarily nomadic, which means they moved from place to place. They frequently would follow herds of animals that they used as their food, and they would hunt them or gather from the local environment to get their food. During this period, it's also known as the Great Human Migration. That's when the Homo sapiens sapiens began to move out from Africa and colonize the rest of the world. You can see on this image here, about 200,000 years ago, we started in Africa, moved to colonize the rest of Africa, moved up into the Middle East, and then continued through South Asia, down along the islands. You get a lot of the Peloponnesian cultures, fantastic seafarers and stuff that colonized all these islands, moved up into China, moved up into Europe. It was during the Ice Age, so the Earth goes through cycles of warming and cooling naturally. Humans can affect that more severely, but it does go naturally between warm and cool periods. During cool periods, normally known as ice ages, a lot of the Earth, especially up in the north here, is frozen over. This created a bridge of ice between Russia, you can see East Russia here, and Alaska, which allowed humans to travel from Asia into North America, which is how all the Native Americans and indigenous people got to this land 20-ish thousand years ago. I know as archaeologists keep working and stuff, that time period kind of shifts and change. But then once the Ice Age ended and the ice bridge melted, we lost contact with all the people over here until colonization happens by the Europeans. Humans also, during this time period, weren't just solely focused on survival all the time. As we created tools and got better at surviving, it allowed for more time for people to pursue other skills like art. Cave paintings and the like are the earliest forms of art that humans have created. Frequently, they were used to depict like hunting scenes and techniques. So this is one of the first and earliest ways in which humans tried to record their knowledge so that they can share with others. Paints and other things were generally made from animal fat and natural dyes and stuff in the environment, like insects, fruits, and the like. As we move out of the Paleolithic period, we go into the Neolithic period, and this is where humankind really starts to speed up their advancement, which is between the years about 10,000 BC to 4,000 BC. This is still prehistory. Prehistory means no one recorded what happened here, so all of it is based on archaeology and stuff. But this is when humans started settling down and developing agriculture. So they would actually have stationary settlements instead of being nomadic, where they would set up systematic agriculture, which allowed them to sustain larger populations in an area, and also for not everyone to be devoted to creating food and making sure that you live. Staple crops took off here. These are crops that are good for humans, generally carbs, and could frequently be the core of a diet every day. So this is rice and wheat, corn, beans, and squash, sometimes tubers like potatoes or yams. This is where people also started beginning to grind these grains and stuff into flour to make other things. And generally, where people settled in the first settlements are what we call river valley civilizations. We covered those in that video we just watched. You have in the Middle East the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, that was Mesopotamia. You have the Nile River in Egypt. You have the Indus River Valley in northern India. You have the Yellow River in China. You also have Norte-Chico in South America, as well as Central America, that saw the first major settlements and civilizations begin to grow. And yes, most of society back then was still focused on getting food, but at least now they sat in one place to do it. This is called the Agricultural Revolution. Additionally, along with these sedentary communities, people started domesticating animals. It's believed dogs were domesticated earlier than this, probably just by helping us hunt and us giving them their scraps. But stuff like sheep and goats and pigs and chickens were started to be bred and kept in captivity for their food at this time. Irrigation systems were also taking off at this time. This is the process of diverting water from a river to more inland so that it can be used for farming. So canals and the like were used. Also for rivers, rivers were prone to flooding. This flooding would then take rich soil and stuff from the riverbed and spread it out and allow for better quality soil that would then grow more and better crops. In these early villages, now that not all people were needed to grow food, you started getting division of labor. This is people like artisans who were weaving baskets or making tools or making pottery or fabric, as well as the start of metallurgy with creating bronze by mixing iron or tin and copper to make bronze. This is also when the wheel was invented, so this started helping people get around faster. You can imagine back before the wheel. You had to walk quite literally everywhere. Most people didn't make it far in their lives. There wasn't really monetary system bartering. So you'd say, I'll give you this sheep if you give me 8 bushels of wheat or something like that. So just kind of like trading with your friends. And as these settlements and societies started to grow, they needed governments to help manage them. So this is where the earliest forms of government were founded. This was frequently through clans and tribes, so things were kind of like a family of people or multiple families of people who lived together. They settled down together, and then they just continued to kind of band together. Those are the clans and tribes. But also, as people started to differentiate themselves and become leaders, we had your first monarchs, so kings and queens. It was frequently done that these people would rule by divine right, which is that a god or gods were the ones that gave them their ability to rule or right to rule. In places like Egypt, the pharaohs were actually believed to be the gods come down to earth. So whenever a new pharaoh was crowned, they would generally take on the persona of one of the gods, like Ra, the god of the sun, or Isis, goddess of magic. I believe Cleopatra said she was Isis. And when speaking about religions at this time, many of them were polytheistic. They believed in many gods, like the god of so if you look at the Greeks, they had Poseidon, they had Zeus, they have Hades, they each have their own little domains of the world that they ruled over, but there wasn't one single god. This is the start of social classes, though. You have kings and queens, then you have priests, military, you have merchants and traders, and then you have the normal people farming. And then generally there was also a underclass of undesirables or slaves and stuff that was the bottom of society. These are the first civilizations. It is also where we started learning how to write and language. Before this, most things were oral tradition, so people had ways of communicating, but now people are actually committing it to stone or to paper. I believe in ancient Babylon, they used tablets, which were like clay, and then they would press indents. It's called cuneiform as the writing system, and that is one of the earliest ones invented. And that is the end of the Neolithic period. So we are that is technically tens and hundreds of thousands of years, but we are just getting to the first actual kind of complex eras of history where you have larger nations that are interacting with each other in unique and interesting ways, usually conflict, which begins around the year 4000, 4500 BCE, before Common Era. It's the newer year dating system. We, instead of before Christ and after death that was used before, now it's Common Era, which is the era we're in now, so years 0 to 2025. And then before Common Era is negative numbers, so you start counting -1 and downwards. So we're about to get into -4000, right before the start of the Bronze Age. But we'll be doing that probably tomorrow.